From the Nazi meth that powered the Blitzkrieg to the vodka Stalin poured into his troops before they charged the guns, every army drugged its men to fight harder, longer, and without fear.
Here are 8 drugs soldiers took during World War II.
Pervitin, the pill that powered the Blitzkrieg Germany. The most infamous drug of the war was Pervitin, the brand label slapped onto crystal methamphetamine and packaged into innocent 3 mg tablets by the Temler Company around 1937. Its champion inside the army was a military physiologist, Dr. Otto Ranke, whose pitch was as seductive as it was alarming. He claimed a single dose could keep a man working for 1.5 to 2 full days without noticeable fatigue. Ahead of the 1940 invasion of France, more than 35 million tablets went out to roughly 3 million troops. Soldiers swallowed it plain, but the army also disguised it as chocolate bars. Panzerschokolade for the tank crews, Fliegerschokolade for the airmen. The drug erased the need for sleep and food, flooded men with confidence and aggression, and let columns of armor punch through enemy lines day and night. But the bill came due fast: heart palpitations, addiction, savage withdrawal crashes, and reckless judgment. By 1941, the medical authorities were already pulling back on the official handouts, though the genie was long out of the bottle. Benzedrine, the Allied answer, Britain, United States. When rumors of a German super drug reached London and Washington, the Allies were not about to let the enemy hold a monopoly on chemical endurance. Their answer was Benzedrine, the brand name for amphetamine sulfate, a gentler, slower cousin of methamphetamine that could still shove fatigue out of a man's mind for hours. The British Royal Air Force became the most careful adopter. A medical officer named Dr. Roland Winfield actually flew roughly 20 live combat sorties over Germany himself, studying how exhaustion gnawed at bomber crews on the terrifying journey home. His conclusion was that the drug held a tired man's performance steady, far better than coffee. The British purchased around 72 million doses. The Americans went bigger, with General Eisenhower ordering roughly 500,000 tablets for the North Africa landings alone, yet the RAF kept it medicalized and never mandatory. Some airmen simply refused, rejecting the whole idea of being chemically doped before a mission. The risks were known even then: anxiety, headaches, and brutal rebound insomnia the morning after. File upon Japan's love of labor pill, Japan. On the other side of the world, Japan ran a methamphetamine program that would outdamage every other nation's. The drug was Philipon, a name meaning roughly love of labor, marketed by Day Nippon Pharmaceutical around 1941, and like the German version, it was simply crystal meth in respectable pharmaceutical clothing. The imperial military spread it everywhere, to infantry, to pilots flying enormous distances over open ocean, to munitions workers grinding through night shifts. It was nicknamed the drug to inspire the fighting spirit, and its forms were almost surreal. Tablets stamped with the imperial chrysanthemum crest, energy-spiked sake, and assault tablets of meth blended with green tea powder. A Day Nippon executive testified to the Japanese Diet in 1951 that during the war the bulk of the drug went to the military, often slipped into candy. Estimates suggest roughly 1 billion pills rolled off the lines between 1939 and 1945. And here is the dark twist that sets Japan apart. When the war ended, those colossal stockpiles leaked onto the streets and ignited the world's first mass methamphetamine epidemic. The kamikaze injection. Chemistry before a suicide run, Japan. Philippon's darkest chapter intersected with one of the war's most haunting images: the kamikaze, the special attack pilots who turned their own aircraft into guided missiles. These were often boys in their late teens, and the question of what was done to their minds before takeoff is among the most uncomfortable in military history. Accounts describe young pilots kept fearless through chemistry. Injections of methamphetamine that superiors called wake-up medicine, meth and green tea storming tablets, and laced chocolates handed over after the ceremonial farewells of sake and decorated headbands. The most chilling testimony came from a former naval doctor named Hiroshi Kambara, who lived past 100 and finally admitted he had been ordered to inject nearly 200 kamikaze pilots with the so-called wake-up medicine to crush their fear. Still, historians urge caution. A 2014 analysis noted that surviving diaries rarely mention routine drugging, and that these young men were driven far more by ideology, honor, and a hopeless situation than by any pill. Meth was present, but it was never the single hand that pushed those boys into the sea. The Narkomovsky 100 grams, the Soviet People's Commissar Vodka, USSR. While the other powers chased chemical alertness in tablets, the Soviet Red Army leaned on the oldest performance drug of all, alcohol. Specifically vodka, institutionalized into one of the most famous rations in military history, the Narkomovsky 100 gram. The People's Commissar's 100 grams, This was no stimulant. It was liquid courage poured down the throat to dull fear before men climbed out of their trenches into machine gun fire. Its origins trace to the freezing winter war against Finland, where Defense Commissar Voroshilov authorized a daily 100 grams of 40% vodka to stiffen men's nerve in -40 cold. When Germany invaded in 1941, Stalin formalized it by decree for frontline troops, but the drink cut both ways. The veteran film director Grigory Chukrai recalled how a sergeant would walk the trench with a bucket and a mug before an attack, and that the older, experienced soldiers tended to refuse while the young ones drank, and it was the drinkers who were first to die. The vodka dulled the very caution that kept men alive, and in the final advance into Germany, captured stocks fueled some of the war's worst chaos. Morphine seratis, the universal mercy, all armies. Not every drug was about squeezing more aggression out of a soldier. Some was simply about mercy, about the screaming, the shattered limbs, and the shock that killed men as surely as the wounds. For that, nearly every army reached for the same answer: morphine. The American version became iconic, the morphine seret, a single-use device like a tiny collapsible toothpaste tube fitted with a needle. A wounded man or a buddy or a medic could pierce the seal and inject half a grain of morphine straight under the skin, buying precious relief before surgical help arrived. There was even a grim safety ritual. Once the dose was given, the empty seret was pinned to the wounded man's collar, so the next person down the line would know not to give him another. Production was enormous, around 75 million serets across the war, but comfort came with a long shadow. Many veterans walked away carrying a morphine dependence they never asked for, and surplus kits were scavenged for the drug inside, a quiet tragedy that for some men led all the way to heroin. Atabrine, the bitter yellow pill of the Pacific Arlies. In the jungles of the Pacific, the deadliest enemy was often not the soldier across the line, it was the mosquito. Malaria tore through Allied formations so savagely, it knocked more men out of the fight than bullets did. With quinine cut off after Japan seized the Dutch East Indies, the Allies turned to a synthetic substitute called Atabrine. This was a daily tablet, swallowed religiously to suppress the disease, manufactured on an almost unimaginable scale. Well over 1 billion doses in the peak years of 1943 and 1944 alone. Combined with DDT and netting, it slashed malaria rates dramatically, in some areas by as much as 70%. In the brutal arithmetic of the Pacific, that pill was worth entire divisions. The trouble was getting men to take it. Atabrine was mouth-puckeringly bitter and turned the skin an unsettling yellow, sallow enough that soldiers swore it was making them sick or sterile, neither of which was true. Officers handed it out personally in the chow line and watched men swallow, and propaganda signs went up, declaring grimly that the skeletons beneath them belonged to men who had skipped their dose. DIX, the Nazi super pill that came too late, Germany. We end with the most dystopian entry of all, a drug that reads like something invented by a mad scientist in a collapsing regime, because that is almost exactly what it was. By 1944, a German vice admiral named Helmuth Hai requested a substance that could let a soldier keep fighting beyond any normal human limit, and a pharmacologist named Gerhard Orzechowski in Kiel set out to build it. The result was a single tablet, DIX, and its recipe was frightening: 5 milligrams of cocaine, 3 of methamphetamine, and 5 of oxycodone. In effect, it was a speedball in pill form, stimulants stacked on an opioid, designed to redefine the very limits of human endurance. And here the horror deepens. Because the testing was carried out on prisoners at the Sachsenhausen concentration camp, forced to march in endless circles under heavy packs, with reports of men covering 55 miles or more before collapsing. The Nazi doctors dreamed of dosing every soldier in the Reich, but the war ended faster than the pill could be mass-produced, and DIX never scaled, the final grotesque punctuation mark on the war's chemical story. That brings us to the end of this video. For more interesting videos like this, click on the cards on your screen.